Hey everybody, Mr. Bremberger back. Today we're going to talk about cellular processes. All right, and in particular, three processes that occur in a couple of those organelles that we've been discussing lately. Those specific organelles are going to be the cell membrane, the mitochondrion, and the chloroplast. And the functions we're going to look at are number one, how things get in and out of the cell, and there's three specific functions we'll key in on. We're also going to look at respiration that takes place in the mitochondrion, and finally the chloroplast activity of photosynthesis. So starting with how things get in and out of the cell, there's three ways in which specific objects are going to be able to achieve entry or exit from the cell, and those are diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. So let's get into the first one, shall we? Basically, that cell membrane is going to act as a gatekeeper. All right, you got a ton of things embedded in that cell membrane, as you can see in the picture. But it's an organelle that has many doors. All right, there are a lot of opportunities for things to get in and out of the cell. You've got small doors, you got big doors, you got doors that are locked and require a chemical key to get in. You have the nucleus saying, hey, we need this or we don't need that. So again, there are a lot of different ways that things can get in and out, and that cell membrane is said to be selectively permeable, meaning certain things are getting in, others are getting out or having to stay out, or actually in some cases stay in. If you take a look at our image here, you'll notice some of those things that allow for the passing of objects in and out of the cell. We have protein channels. We have lipids that are composed in two layers, or known as a lipid bilayer. This is going to allow for certain things to squeeze through that layer or not be able to move through that layer. You also have a lot of other things attached to the outside of the cell, like carbohydrate chains for energy, or which will maybe eventually be used for energy. You've also got other protein molecules that are doing jobs within the cell membrane as well. So if we look at the first activity, which is diffusion, we have the movement of things or substances from greater concentration to lesser concentration. Great example of this is right here on the page. Okay, if we take this yellow area as our cell, you'll notice that there are only 3 green objects on the inside of the cell and a lot more green objects on the outside. Now, if diffusion were to hold true, think about what would happen here. Go ahead and do that. Think about what is going to go on with these objects. Are these 3 going to move out? Are more going to move in? Go ahead. Why don't you pause right now and think about exactly what would go on. All right. Hopefully, you thought about something, number one. And if you thought about the fact that if diffusion holds true, some of these green objects are going to move in, you'd be totally correct. All right. Now, they're not all going to move in, just a few, until equilibrium is reached. So you'll have, maybe 4 or 5, 6 of these move into the cell, through the cell membrane, and when there's an even amount, the stuff will stop moving, as long as diffusion is taking place. Now, this requires no energy at all right? It's something that's known as passive transport, which in science terms means no energy is required. It just kind of happens naturally. Same thing also happens with osmosis. All right, osmosis is a lot like diffusion, although it's a little bit more specific. See, osmosis only deals with water. All right, only water, the movement of water from greater concentration to lesser concentration across that membrane. Again, passive transport example here. No energy is required for the cell to achieve this function. If you take a look at this blurry picture here, we have an environment. We also have a selectively permeable membrane dividing our environment. We've got sugar on the right, water on the left. Take a look and think about what could happen here. And go ahead, grab 30 seconds of your own time, pause this, and just think, where is osmosis going to occur? All right, hopefully by analyzing the picture you noticed that if the water concentration is higher on the left, we're going to have some movement of water across this membrane. Now, you also may have realized that, hey, diffusion could take place here as well by some of these sugar molecules moving from the right side to the left. So again, great opportunity to analyze not only osmosis here, but also diffusion. The third type of transport that we want to talk about here is pretty much the opposite of passive transport. It's active transport. Now, active transport is going to use energy in your book, and we'll describe 3 ways in which that can occur. But the most specific example that I want to show you is right here in this image on the page. All right, take a look. In active transport, we're going to move objects from low concentration to high concentration across that membrane, which is not a way that things generally want to move. So, with that said, now, please analyze this example in that sense. Things are going to move from low to high. Energy is required to do that. A couple other examples of how active transport may occur. One of them is right here in this diagram with the movement of objects through specific proteins. All right, proteins may require some energy. For example, some receptor proteins here, which kind of act like a keyed lock. For example, only specific items are going to be able to move through that specific receptor protein. It's going to require some energy. Also, your channel protein has a little bit bigger door, kind of like a garage door. You know, think for example, if you wanted to move an elephant through a door, we wouldn't be able to move it through a standard door that we use on, like, say, the classroom or, you know, your door at home. We would need a bigger door, right? We'd need a garage door. So these channel proteins kind of act as garage doors, and they're garage doors that have a tendency to be always open. You could also have gated channel proteins as well, like what we see here in the middle. Acts the same way as a channel protein, however, it has a closed position as well. So again, those are your 3 ways, or your 2 ways that active transport can occur, and 3 ways generally that things get in and out of the cell. Recap, you've got diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. 2 of which require no energy, that being diffusion and osmosis, and then finally active transport will require energy generally. Now, the last 2 processes I want to talk about, which are a little bit closely related, is the issue of photosynthesis and respiration. Now, depending on the type of organism that we have, will require one or the other, or a combination of both. Generally, both are going to be needed. However, how we get food into the cell is vital. Some organisms have the ability to make their own food, others do not. You and I, and this liger down here, we have the ability to make our own food. We have the ability, or we don't have the ability to make our own food. Let's be clear on that. If we were able to go out and soak up the sun rays and make our food by ourselves, we would be referred to as an autotroph. Okay, these are plants and other objects that have the ability to photosynthesize and make their own food. We don't have that ability. We got to go out and consume, hunt, gather in order to get food that we need in order to survive. So those autotrophs photosynthesize. What the heck does that mean? Well, photosynthesis is the process of using light to make food for plants. It's a 2-step process generally that is going to take place in the leaves of plants. And more specifically within those leaves, the cells that make them up, and within those cells we have chloroplasts, right? These are our food generating places where sunlight is absorbed. That is step 1. All right, you got to take in the sunlight and have the right materials in play in order to complete step 2. Those other 2 materials that are going to be needed in order to kickstart this chemical process is carbon dioxide and water. Now, hopefully you've all grown a plant before of some kind in school. And anybody that has knows that plants need water, right? Some plants need it more than others. However, in order for photosynthesis to occur, you have to have 1, sunlight, 2, carbon dioxide, and lastly, water. Now, what that's going to generate or make is oxygen and sugar. Right? Oxygen, the plant really doesn't need that much, which anything extra gets emitted into the atmosphere. And also, it's going to make sugar. This is the food for the plant. That food will then be made in order to, utilize respiration, which is the next process we're going to talk about. So, in a picture form, here's the overall process of photosynthesis. Sunlight comes into the leaves of plant, which also absorbs carbon dioxide. Water, absorbed through the roots, will make its way up a stem or trunk of a leaf of a plant and move into the places where photosynthesis is going to occur, which is at the cellular level. Once you have those 3 ingredients, water as well as oxygen will be, let me start over. Photosynthesis is going to generate oxygen and glucose, which is the fancy name for food for a plant. Chemical equation, for those of you that love equations, check it out. Carbon dioxide and water in the presence of sunlight will generate or create glucose and oxygen. Now, as far as the respiration side of things is concerned, we've got another chemical reaction. This one takes place in the mitochondrion of organisms. Here, cells break down food molecules such as glucose and eventually release some energy, which is used for other cellular processes to keep cells and organisms alive and healthy. Step 1, we break down a little bit of that glucose in the cytoplasm, and eventually it will make its way into the mitochondrion for step 2, where it's further broken down, mixed together with a little oxygen that's also absorbed by the cell, which will create a couple of things. The main ingredient, energy. All right, another thing that's going to be created through respiration is carbon dioxide, right? All of you have breathed out before. That is you getting rid of the product of respiration, or one of the products of respiration, that being CO2. Take a look at this equation. We've got glucose and oxygen coming together to create carbon dioxide, water, which we'll use for other cellular processes, as well as energy, which comes in a fancy form known as ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. All right, you'll find out more about that when you get into high school biology next year. So, recap. If we're going to compare these two processes, think about right now how they're similar and how they're different. Take 30 seconds and pause. Check it out. Hopefully you notice something about the equations. They're basically the same, all right? They're just kind of flip-flopped. Look, see if you can label which is which. Go ahead and pause right now. Hopefully you said this top one is photosynthesis because it requires light, right? Carbon dioxide, water. Look, the left side of this equation is almost identical to the right side of the respiration equation. Same thing with this up here. Glucose and oxygen, look, it's the products of it's the products of photosynthesis, which are what you need for respiration to occur. Pretty slick, eh? If you've got any questions on this, be sure to let me know. We'll see you next time.